going next? Oh, it's Tom Segura, right?
Yeah. And Bert.
So I've wanted to talk about Tom and Bert for a few weeks now because I think Segura is much more guilty of this than Bert at this point. Bert has kind of always been who he is. He's talked about wanting to be famous and recognized and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
I think Segura is an interesting case because he has gone on this crusade against the poors.
Yeah.
He hates poor people. That's kind of become his new thing. And then he leaned into it, and that started to become his character. And he was very critical of the people who say he's lost touch. Now, my argument has always been, if you look at fans of Your Mom's House or anything else Segura does, the criticism is not, hey, we're mad that you're wealthy. It's, now you'll just talk about, hey, I bought a new boat. And I flew private this week. And there's no funny stories attached to it. It's kind of just you, I guess, bragging. I guess you could say talking about your life, if that's what your life is now. But it feels just kind of like you're flaunting stuff and there's no humor attached to it, really. Now, Tom's response to that is people who criticize him for that are jealous. And they're mad about their own lives, and they should work harder. If they want to fly private, they should just work harder. And sure, I agree with that. I guess if you want to fly private, work harder. But no one that I've seen that criticizes Segura is saying, hey, you fly private and I want to fly private. They're saying, why am I listening to this show now? You know?
Right.
It used to be a show like I used to listen to Your Mom's House. And I remember it was a show that talked about a lot of like they would play clips from Reddit and YouTube and all this stuff. The most famous one is I think his name is Robert Paul Champagne or something like that. The Try It Out guy.
Yeah.
Piss on me, beat me, try it out. They talked about that guy who's obviously probably a little mentally unwell and not the most financially successful. And they managed to do it without even mentioning his financial status. They just made fun of this lunatic, you know? So it wasn't always this class war that Tom has framed his career into the last couple of years. And then recently, Tom has backed off that. I think he noticed the Delta thing was a pivotal moment for him, it seems. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Controversy? About a year ago, Tom was on a Delta flight, and he started criticizing the flight attendants. He's like, can you believe they treated me like this? I forget the specifics of the story. Leave it in the comments if you guys remember. But basically, Tom looked really bad because he was like, can you believe I have to deal with this? And the people were like, I think the flight attendant was just doing her job. You know? You're not dealing with a hardship, Tom. What do you expect us to side with you here? And so I think that's when he really started to lose people. And so in the last year, he's kind of backed off that. And it seems like he's made an effort to be more relatable. So anyways, they're talking about the HACKRIDE girl. And this is what I found interesting, where it seems like Tom is wrestling with where he stands with his audience, in popular culture, in his career. It seems like he's kind of grappling with like who he is. And I thought this clip was a pretty good example of that from the latest Two Bears, One Cave.
It's fascinating. I remember the first person I ever watched change, right? And I could be fucking this story up, but like the first person that where like celebrity changed them a little bit was like Daniel Tosh. And Daniel Tosh made a joke on stage. He's like, yeah, I didn't like who I was. That's why I changed.
That's so funny.
It was
first of all, it was a bit that he was doing on stage. It wasn't. This isn't a personal story. It was a joke that we all heard him do in a special.
Correct.
But whatever.
I think I've changed in a lot of ways. Like celebrity does affect you. You have access to things that you never would have had access to. And I think those are all cool. And I'm sure it'll happen to her. Like I'm watching it happen to our friends who are getting like ultra famous. And I'm watching them be uncomfortable with it. And it affecting them. But once it affects you, once you start dressing down to go on stage to seem relatable. Yeah. Like say you show up in a suit and then you go, yeah, but I got to go out in old sneakers and a stained shirt.
It's inauthentic.
Then it's inauthentic.
And the funny thing is they're doing it to be authentic. They're like, this will make me seem like I'm the same guy, and it's contrived, and it's actually, you can go as far to say it is unethical, because you
Now,
are
this is very interesting. It's just interesting to watch this psychology. So I remember, I don't think we ever got to it, but a few months ago, Tom Segura had you might have even sent it to me, Craig. I can't remember. But Tom Segura had a video on his Instagram where he's like, "Hey, gang, I was really in the mood for a croissant." And I'm putting a tone on it that isn't there. It wasn't him being sarcastic or anything.
I did send
He's
this.
like, he's like, "Hey, I was in the mood for a croissant. So I flew in one of the world's greatest pastry chefs, and he made me a croissant." And there was no like, there's no tone of like, how ridiculous is it that I did this? You know what I mean? It's just like, he thought it was a totally normal thing that he did. And everyone's like, okay, no, so the joke is what though? The joke is that you wasted $80,000 on a croissant, or what?
I know we give Bert a lot of shit often. I don't think he's changed since college.
That's what I've been trying to say. Is like, I think Bert is who he is.
Yes.
Like, no one would look at Bert. Like, I know they're talking about dressing down here. Like, Bert is a shirtless drunk. There's no one that looks at Bert Kreischer as highfalutin. And even when he goes to, in this episode, he talks about a party at Whitney Cummings' house that he went to with like Eric Weinstein and a bunch of, like, a lot of intellectual people were there. And Bert was talking about how it was tough for him to relate to a lot of these people and all that. So I know people don't like Bert Kreischer, but I think he's just kind of always been who he is.
Definitely.
More or less. Now you can argue, like, is the machine story made up, or does he lie about his stories? So that conflicts with he always is who he's been. But like, I think more or less you know what you're getting with Kreischer. Whereas Segura is in this weird mental pretzel where he's like, no, a guy that's famous that wears jeans, he's lying to you. And it's actually unethical of him to dress down. Where it's like, no, that might just be how he is. Like, I think Gillis is a good example of a guy who's got a lot of money now. Like, he still dresses the same as he used to. Which also, you don't have to do. You can dress nicer, and you don't even have to acknowledge it, in my opinion. But Segura does this weird thing where he's in a constant tug of war with his audience over whether or not he's changed, and he tries to there's this constant rationalization of who he is, which I think is weird.
Manipulating people to think that you are something that you are not. And I know a dozen guys like this.
I know more guys like this than the other.
And the funny thing is, like, they're full of shit. These guys are full of shit. And people will sometimes like talk about these guys like, hey, look how nice this is. Like, he's one of us. And he's like, no, he's not. He's manipulating you. He lies.
He's manipulating you. Yeah.
It's nonsense.
But I couldn't even get the argument, like, so he should act like whoever they're talking about. Yeah, I don't know who they're referencing necessarily. But, you know what? It might be a good example, like Larry the Cable Guy. Where, like, I don't think when Dan Whitney is off stage, he's burping and drinking beers and just being a regular redneck.
He very much could be.
No, well, his name's Dan Whitney and he doesn't have an accent. So those
That's
are two
true.
pretty good hints that he's not the same guy off stage.
That's true.
But, like, I don't know. That's a character that he's playing on stage, but Segura is telling us, like, we should revolt against him. He's the problem. Not people that don't try to relate to the audience at all. Like, it's a very weird angle he's taking. And unlike a lot of people, like, I get shit in the comments a lot because I don't hate Segura or Bert. I don't hate either of them. But I do acknowledge some of the flaws that people point out. And this constant struggle, like, I would say to Segura, just be you, do whatever. And if what you are is kind of a rich asshole that looks down on the poor people that support your show, the chips will fall as they may. Some people will still continue to support you and not give a fuck. Other people will criticize you online for that. And that's just what happens. But you don't have to, what's manipulative is not wearing jeans and a messy t-shirt on stage.
Yeah.
What's manipulative is going on your podcast and being like, no, everyone's a liar but me. Don't you see?
Yeah, Hidden Hand Media in the comments says, so Tom thinks people should throw their money in your face if you're rich.
That's the thing, is you can talk about going on private jets and getting a nice Rolex and buying a boat and a jet ski. Just tie it to a cool story. You know?
I don't know if they're going to be able to do that.
Well, then don't talk about it then.
But how are we going to know that they flew private?
Well, see, now you're in the real mental pretzel that Tom has entered. How are we going to know that he flew private and that he has a nice watch and a nice car, but there's no fun story attached to it? Well, I guess I just have to tell that. It's like, no, Rogan talks about rich guy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, Rogan does things that we're not able to do.
He's always like, I am so incredibly lucky for this.
Well, there's that, but I don't even think you need to do that. My point is, he's telling us these experiences because he's like, so I was at dinner talking to Elon Musk, and Elon said something really interesting to me. Now, when I'm picturing that, I'm not picturing them at a Chipotle. You know, I understand they're probably at a very nice place that I couldn't afford to go to.
Right.
Who gives a fuck? As long as whatever he's quoting Elon on is actually interesting, I'm hooked. I'm listening.
Yeah, he's not like, so when the 18th course came out and we were...
You wouldn't believe this place. I mean, it's so... Guess what the bill was? It's like, I bet it was a lot.
We drank out of Winston Churchill's mug.
And I'll tell you the perfect example of why Tom is wrong in this whole... Like, Tom goes on Are You Garbage? And is a very interesting segment. They still have on their wall of Are You Garbage? Tom is the highest... whatever he said he gave for a wedding gift for someone, it's by far the most they've ever heard. They made that, the Are You Garbage guys made that into a fun, interesting topic on their show. Like, that can be interesting if you make it funny and interesting. But just saying, like, yeah, I went to a wedding and I gave a guy a lot of money. Nice. Hey, we're jealous. No, it's just like, are we laughing? Or what's the topic?
The thing is, I was like, Tom, if you called him garbage on that show, he'd be like, no, he'd get
it would upset him, yeah.
See, the one thing they did that I thought was funny with money was, didn't Tom buy Bert like Hitler's teacup or some shit?
See, like that kind of stuff. Do that.
That's funny.
Waste your money on silly shit. And I even think they had something, I didn't really follow it, but like they would each get each other birthday gifts, more extravagant. Like, if you can make that funny, go for it. But if you just like, I bought a jet ski. Well, why do we give a fuck?
Right.
You know, if you crash the jet ski, like, you know, who's another great example, Dave Portnoy, who, you know, I have my issues with the man, but I think he's done it smart. Portnoy has hundreds of millions. Portnoy is more rich than probably either of these two guys, I would think.
Definitely.
You watched it. He lives on Nantucket. He has the most expensive house in Massachusetts. What has he done with that? He almost sank his boat. he shot a flare gun up for the Coast Guard to come save him because he didn't know how to start it. That's funny and interesting. Like, that's how you make a rich lifestyle interesting. No one was like, when Dave was getting rescued by the Coast Guard, no one was like, oh, you rich asshole, fuck you. People were like, oh, that's funny. You know?
That is funny. He's got his stupid fucking captain hat on.
Yeah, Captain Dave is shooting fire into the sky because he can't start his fucking boat. That's funny rich guy stuff, Tom. Get caught in the middle of the ocean, I guess is what I'm saying.
That is very funny.
So, Podcast Cringe put out a video this week, kind of, in my mind, related to this subject, because Joe Rogan was talking about his friends who have kind of wasted their money. And I don't know if you can figure out some of the people he might be talking about here. Now, the reason I didn't play the Podcast Cringe video is he has kind of a different angle on this. His angle is more like, well, Rogan also wastes money. But I felt Rogan was making a good point, so I'm going to play Rogan's clip here with Shane Smith.
Yeah, real quick. Reverend Shitstain Powerful Pooper, $5. Did you see Shane Smith on Rogan this week? Politically inept, lowest rated ep ever at 7K upvotes and 129,000 downvotes.
I noticed. Oh, I didn't notice the likes versus. But I did notice, I was surprised it was like less than 500,000 views when I saw it. I was surprised by that. But I guess it was a lot of Rogan like slamming Vice and Shane Smith just going, yeah, we really fucked that up.
But here it is here.
The big thing too is keep it small.
Keep it small, dude.
Keep it small.
Keep it
Like
small.
it's just me and Jamie, and we have a video editor that's not even local. He just gets it on the internet.
And
for
also
us.
Jamie's super good vibes, which is
Yeah, no, he's the best. But it's the most important. I have friends that have big podcasts, and they
Yeah.
have like this huge staff,
Yeah.
and they have all these people running around. I'm like, what do all these people do? And it's like they want this feeling of they're the boss of a bunch of employees.
Yeah.
For some reason,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they want all these production people that are creating content. But
Yeah.
then you have inter office conflicts, and they're always putting out fires, and people are complaining, and then people leave and make videos talking about what people
Okay, I will say,
That sounds
right.
like Chubb, actually.
all right, I think he might be talking about Brendan Schaub. You really have to read between the lines. He's like, you're kind of a meathead that doesn't really know how to run a business, and then you got a guy who quits and talks about what a moron you are and how bad Gringo Poppy was. And it's like, boy, who's he talking about?
If I told you who it was, you'd be surprised.
No, he's definitely talking about Schaub, but I think it also applies to Segura. Now, I will say, like, so I went to Your Mom's House Studios, not to brag, go watch First Date with Lauren Compton. It wasn't a ton of people. Like, it was somewhat bare bones is the wrong term, because I'm sure there's some people that don't do a ton there. But it wasn't like there were 80 people just doing nothing coming up to me, like asking if you need coffee or anything. Maybe that's different on a day when a celebrity is in there.
Or Bert and Tom.
Yeah, very possibly. It might be different when it's just Lauren's show,
Yeah.
But it seemed relatively bare bones for the amount of office space they have and everything. But I do think it applies to Segura in the sense that, like, do they need 8 producers on Your Mom's House to laugh in the other room? Or is it just like one guy probably could, they just need Any or whatever the guy's name is,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey man, you're dealing in this thing where there's currency in that information. There's currency for these mediocre people. So you
100%.
hire these mediocre people, and these mediocre people attack you because there's currency in attacking you, but you didn't need them in the first place. This whole thing was stupid. Like, you're making a little bit more money, but you have more problems, but you don't notice that money. Like, you have to pay attention to what you notice, right? Whatever the fuck you have in your bank account, if you're a fairly wealthy person and you have $100 more, $100 less, $1,000 more, $1,000 less, you don't notice it. But I'll tell you what you do notice. You notice hassle. You notice problems. Those problems are worth a lot of money to get rid of. Like, if you had a bunch of employees like, fuck, what can I do? There's so many people. It's so annoying. God, I wish we were small again. Getting back to small again is a grind. You got to fire people. You got to downsize. You got to figure out how to do it. That's a mess, man. You don't want that mess. So that extra money that you got by making things too big, you fucked yourself.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely talking about Schaub, obviously, because I think Your Mom's House is also doing much better than Thick Boy Studios. But
I think so. Yeah.
but nonetheless, I think the example still holds, and it's interesting to hear a guy like Rogan, where that's kind of his philosophy of, like, you don't need to be greedy with a lot of this stuff. And you're hearing a couple guys that he propped up, like Bert and Tom, be like, no, we should do that. We should flaunt all this. It's very important that we do this. So I think it's like, I don't know, just as a fan. And again, I listen to what I just said. Like, if I listen back to this, I don't hear a guy who's jealous. Like, I'm not like, oh, damn. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer are a lot more successful than me, and they deserve that. But criticizing that, I don't hear a guy that's like, they shouldn't have it. Like, because you can listen to a guy with like Rogan with $400 million and be like, no, that's just the mindset that I agree with more, and he's got more money than both of them. So, yeah. So I don't know. Segura's in this weird place where he's constantly, it feels like debating his audience through his podcast, where he's making these points of like, the bad guys are the people who wear jeans and a t-shirt on stage. And it's constant back and forth of like, no, the poor's their problem is I'm too rich. And it's like, no one's saying that. It's just like we liked the podcast when we didn't care how much money you had. We didn't have any idea if you were doing very well, if you were poor, whatever. We just knew you had a successful, funny podcast. That's all we really knew about your bank account.
I miss that.
Yeah, that's all. So I don't know. Tom's in a weird place. It's interesting to watch him navigate it, but I could see it leading to him snapping one day. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I can't wait.
All right.
Go to blindmike.net for everything Blind Mike. Look at me. I did it. Kragers did it.